Hi, I'm Gerd Tundle, acclaimed health journalist, turned motivational speaker, and transformational coach. This show is for anyone who wants to lead a happier, healthier, and inspired life. Create more self-love, inject more joy and abundance into their daily life. Join me for inspiring interviews and spiritual topics so you can become a soul warrior. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Get Inspired with Gerds podcast. I'm your host and today I have an inspirational guest with me who is an absolute beautiful soul and is helping people to shine their inner light and follow their life's calling. Rebecca Campbell is a best-selling author, spiritual teacher, ground spiritual mentor and soulful guide. She is the best-selling author of Light is the New Black, and it's a book I absolutely adore. And guys, I would definitely check that out because if any of you are kind of stuck about thinking about where you're heading or what your soul's purpose is, this book will definitely help you to kind of almost start to sprinkle the seeds and trust in yourself. Rebecca has guided thousands of women to listen to their callings of their soul and create a life that is completely aligned to them. She believes we can all tap into our creativity and lead from a place that is authentic and filled with light. Rebecca, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the show and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Really happy to be here with you.
Oh, bless you, Rebecca. Well, your story really interests me because the background that you came from and now the work that you do, it's really powerful. So could you tell the listeners what your life was like before you became a spiritual teacher?
For sure. Well, I think as a young child, I was always really drawn to anything to do with the soul and spirituality. But to be honest, like I grew up in a family and, a society where, like with my school and my friends and all of that, where no one else seemed to be very interested in it. So I kind of created a bit of a spiritual closet early on. I had my first awakening, like a significant one where I really started being fascinated by past lives, etc. When I was around about 13. And then within a couple of years, I just decided to pretty much create a bit of a double life because I'd be going to these like workshops and loving all of that, but also it just didn't fit in with my normal life, which, I was really grounded, loved sport, did, was going to parties and hanging out with boys and all of that kind of stuff. And so it just like didn't match. It was like these two separate lives almost. And so I went into what I call a spiritual closet. And, so like in my spare time, I'd be like inhaling everything that I could because it just interested me so much. And I was always a writer and loved just like sharing. I remember being, on road trips, and that's when I heard my soul's voice the most. And I just love those moments where you're just looking out the window, and then I would receive what I call now it's like soul whispers, like the voice of your intuition, and sometimes even create creativity, whether it's through words or poems or whatever form. And so I always had that, but and I very much had this like niggle where I'm like, I know that there is I knew that my work was a big part of what I wanted to contribute to the world, and I was very much like, I just want to do something, I want to contribute, I want to make the world a better place, and that was always in me. And so what I decided to do was go undercover as a light worker and go into media where it'd be like I looked at like all of the messages that were bombarding people, and I was like, I can just like put positive energy in there. And so that was like secretly what I was trying to do. But to be honest, I look back now and it was amazing training for me. Like I learned so much. I was a copywriter in advertising, a creative, so coming up with ideas constantly, really learning the craft of writing, really understanding media, understanding brands and all of that. And it was so fun and such a great industry, but also I was exhausted all the time, and I knew it wasn't in alignment with the work that I really came here to do. And but when I look back now, I said to myself, I'm like, oh no, this is what I'm definitely in the right industry or whatever. But really, I was just scared to do what I do now. Yeah. I was scared that I just didn't feel ready. I was waiting until I turned like 40 and my life fell apart before I actually stepped out and did the work I do now.
I just wanted to say, Rebecca, I totally relate with where you're coming from, because I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life being a journalist, and it's like, I love media, I love the industry, but I found that the energy was so heavy.
Yeah.
And
yeah, totally. It is. And also, like, it's a really exciting industry. Like, there's many industries like that, but I find there's so many of us who ended up getting training in communication, which I really don't think that that's a coincidence. Like, you with your journalist background, like, what a perfect training to now go and do the work you do now. Like, clearly, like, just interviewing podcasts, for example, like, what a brilliant training. And I think that for many of us who are drawn into the media and communications and all of that, it's like we're learning these brilliant skills and other industries as well, which are never wasted. And it can feel like when you have that knowing, and I'm not sure when it started for you, but it was probably a good 5 years before I made the leap that I was kind of like very slowly admitting that this life that I'd consciously created, this career I'd consciously created, just wasn't in alignment with like who I was at soul level, really. And that was, to be honest, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. It was because for me, my career was, and it sounds funny saying this, but my whole life I was like, no, my work is what I'm here for. And it had always been my number one. Really, truly, and I know that, like, you shouldn't say that, but it's true, it was. And so for me, actually admitting that and kind of getting to the point where I'm like, whoa, this career that I really consciously created and I put everything into, I'm going to have to walk away from it. And that was really difficult for me because especially because what I was being called to do was so categorically different. Like, I remember when I was just like, how am I going to do this? And I remember coming up with like an elevator pitch before I left the industry. And I really encourage people to do this, particularly when you're telling people, whether it's in your industry or if it's just like family and friends, what you're doing. It's like, if I was to say, oh, I'm leaving advertising to do Akashic Records soul readings, like, they would be like, who are you? And I don't even know who you are. So what I ended up saying, which was true, was that I've always had this urge to write books, and there's a topic I'm really fascinated in. It's in the self-development world and spirituality. And I feel like if I don't give myself this opportunity now to write it, I'll always regret it. And so having that elevator pitch helped me so much because, it made sense because I had been training as a copywriter and as a creative. And so to then go and write a book is not so left field. And then it was like not so much about the content as it was about, me just following a dream that I had. And the interesting thing with this, and this is why I encourage people to do it, get that elevator pitch right, because you don't have to tell everyone everything. I was so worried that people were going to be like, oh my gosh, like, she's gone crazy and ruined my reputation and all of that. But what ended up happening, because I said it just with conviction and excitement and inspiration, really, what happened was people didn't really care so much about what I was doing. And instead they just respond and be like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. Or I want to travel here. This is what I want to do. And so it actually wasn't about me at all. So that's the best advice I could give for someone who is really feeling called to do something which is categorically different from the reputation that they've built up. Like, just work out the best way to just kind of like sum it up in a sentence, and you don't have to tell every single bit of the truth.
Do you know what? I totally relate, because when I had that transformation, it was like I was toying between being a journalist, doing the work that I do now, and it was like I was being torn apart. And then it took me actually to be made redundant to actually wake up.
Well, like, you're not alone. It's such a common thing to happen, It's whether it's being made redundant or different parts of your life just kind of being ripped apart in a way. It's like there's a card in the tarot deck where it's called the Tower. I don't know if you've got that before, but there was a period of my life I would do my tarot cards every week, hoping I'd get a different card every single week. It's that one. And the thing about that card is that it's like everything is crumbling. Everything that you once kind of like looked to as safety is actually crumbling. It's like the falling, so that the deck can be cleared so that what is new and wanting to rise in you can rise in you. And I think this is the thing in our society, and God, certainly me, we want to be blooming all year round. We want to be like on and doing the right thing constantly, you know, but actually, and particularly industries like the communication industry or media, it's like deadline after deadline after deadline. And so, but if we look at, say, the seasons of nature, it's teaching us how to be human constantly, right? How to be souls having a human experience, in the sense of like, yeah, there's spring and summer where it's like lots of things blooming and rising and being in our best. And then comes autumn, which where I am in the world at the moment in London, I'm looking out my door and it's just leaves falling constantly. And that's, you know, the reminder that it's like, okay, maybe it's time to let those things go that are no longer in alignment. And then winter will come. And that's, I think for me anyway, it's the worst season, because it's like, and I'm talking metaphorically as well, because it's like, it's when everything is like those things have been let go, and like for you maybe it's like when you did become made redundant, then it's like, oh God, what now, you know? But it's actually in that desolation of nothingness in a way, where it feels like nothing new will bloom. And for me that was experiencing grief, like the loss of like really dear people to me, where it was like that aloneness, that kind of like, and the thing about that word alone, it's like if you add another L, it's all one, you know? And so it's like such a tender line between the two. And if you allow yourself to have the winter, to have the rock bottom, then it's inevitable that before you know it, spring will come and new ideas will sprout and inspiration will come and opportunities will come. And then you'll go into summer and then again, here we go. So I think that's one of the most challenging things. It certainly has been for me.
Absolutely relate with you. Like everything after I was made redundant, even to be honest, before it, my life was, to be honest, Rebecca, it was a toxic mess, my life. But my career was like on track, but my personal life was a mess. And then it took me to have that fall and have that redundancy. Then everything just kind of, like you said, actually went like messy. Like I had a cancer scare and like I thought I was going to die. Like all these things were happening and it was like a build up. But it was when it got to, like, you're right, actually, when it got to about spring, that's when it started to heal. And that's when everything started to raise to the surface. And I began to learn how to use healing techniques just by trusting my intuition. And yeah, you're right. Actually, the year after, everything just shifted.
That's amazing.
I love the way you kind of said all that. So Mada, you know, you left your job and then you went down this route. So, you know, now you're a spiritual teacher. So how are you helping people to answer their soul's kind of calling?
Oh, well, I mean, lots of different ways. So like through books. So I've got 2 books, Light is the New Black and Rise Sister Rise. I've got like online courses, a membership site called the Rise Sister Rise Sisterhood, where I do like soul journeys and meditations and lots of different things like that each month. And then also like workshops and events. I love working with people in that way. And I think with my work, what it all comes down to is really providing the space for anyone to tune into the wisdom of their own soul. Because, you know, it's our intuition which is constantly whispering and guiding us. But, you know, in the middle of our busy, messy, chaotic lives, which so many of us have, I don't want my life to be this like peaceful meditation room. That's not the life I'm here to live. And most of us aren't. We're not necessarily here to be Buddhist monks, but it's in order to hear that intelligent whisper of our soul, which is, to me, the intuition is the part of us which is linked to the rest of life, like the intelligent force which tells the planet to spin, which tells tulips when to bloom versus roses when to bloom, that brings the tides in, that causes the moon to wax and wane. That same intelligent force is within us. And so, I see my role and my work really in providing tools and inspiration and just the space really for us to surrender back into that, and to really, one phrase I use a lot is work your light, which is at the end of each chapter of Light is the New Black. And that's like really soul inquiry questions. And the reason I say work your light is because, I find a lot in spirituality and meditation and stuff, it's like, in order to connect with our spirit, it's all quite fluffy. It can be anyway. But in my experience, developing a relationship with your soul isn't fluffy at all. Yeah. And it's like, just like if you need to go to the gym, if you want to have a six-pack, you've got to go to the gym and do a lot of sit-ups. Now, I'm not that committed to having a six-pack, so I don't do that every day. But if I really was, I know that I would have to work, and so it doesn't mean that you have to spend 4 hours a day, but it's like carving out a little chunk of time to really be with and hear the voice of your soul, your intuition, because the more that you do that and the more dedicated you are towards doing that, the easier it is to hear it, and the louder the voice gets, the inner voice gets. And so I feel I'm really passionate about helping people develop that relationship, because I really feel that it's the best relationship we can have, and it's definitely the one that we should invest the most in, because it's like if we have that, it's like that is constantly guiding us every moment of every day.
I love that. That's amazing, my dear. And definitely, I think it's so important that we do need to trust our intuition. A lot of us, I guess, when we go into the busy world of work, we kind of lose that, don't we?
Yeah, totally. The busy world of anything, this is the challenge of being having the human experience. It's like, gosh, relationships are just we know that they're the number one way to learn and grow, and it's impossible not to get triggered. And so, I really feel that, it's easy to look at teachers and read books and stuff and feel like there is this final destination that we need to get to when it comes to enlightenment and spirituality and stuff. But in my experience, it's not a linear line, rather it's a spiral. And the more you honor the wisdom of your soul and the more work you do on yourself, it doesn't mean that you stop bad stuff happening or challenges arising. The challenges are how we grow. I remember my teachers telling me that if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not growing. So I don't think that it's possible to avoid, just to wrap yourself in this cotton wool ball, because you won't be truly living. In order to live a heart-led life, it takes courage, and what courage is only possible with fear. And so it's like actually when you're doing this work and dedicated to doing this work, what happens is that we recover quicker. So when we do, it's inevitable that people in our life will leave, whether it's through death or relationships changing. But when we have this deeper connection with our own soul, then and get to really deeply know ourselves, what happens is that we're not sidelined and flawed every time it happens. We're able to come back to center quicker.
had a random like visualization then as you were talking. I kind of want to see it like a snake. You know how a snake sheds its skin? It's kind of like we're always shedding a little bit more, like more and more to get closer to who we are.
Well, exactly. And so, yeah, it's about, you know, a lot of mystics talk about our true self, like with the capital S, as being just so perfect, and we're born that way. And and we know that, like, you just have to look at a baby and you're like, whoa. You know? And so our job, I think, and our challenge is to find our way back to that while embracing life fully. And it's like, it's and that's the paradox, and that's the tragedy and the magnificence of being human.
I find as well when you just like that inner child, you like set it free. You feel a lot lighter as well, and you kind of just don't care what anyone else thinks.
Exactly.
So, Maddie, I just wanted to ask you a bit more about your book, Light is the New Black. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So it's a guide to answering your soul's callings and working your light. And so it really is, it's a book for anyone who is like, either my life feels stuck and I don't know what to do. That it's a great book for that. It's also a great book for anyone who has this niggle and it's like, oh, I know I'm here for a reason. No matter whether or not you found that, the reason I call it soul callings rather than calling is that, you know, if you found your soul calling, this book still is for you, because in my experience, the soul is always calling. And it's jam-packed full of, like, such great exercises. Like, I call them soul inquiries. Like I said before, it's like the work your light exercises at the end of most chapters, where it's like if you like do the book properly, like, you will get clear guidance. And I mean, you've read it, right?
Yes, I love it.
What did you experience in the book?
See, after I finished with the book, it kind of, like, it cleared everything. So, like, I kind of already knew where I was heading. But like you said, like, I already kind of know my soul's purpose and, like, my calling. But it helped me to become even more clearer and define things more shortened. In, like, I think I had, like, a bazillion ideas in my head. But it really helped me to bring it down to, like, a small amount. And, like, now I see how everything links together.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that. I mean, yeah, I so relate to that thing of, like, so many ideas and so many like, how do these come together? So I'm so glad. Yeah, I think that's the repetition of the exercises definitely helps with that. You know, in my workshops I do soul inquiry as well, and often we'll ask different questions, and some will be slightly different and some will be very different. And what happens, it's almost like you're kind of like, you're just peeling back the layers one after the other and you know when you get to the one where it's like, oh, this is it. And yeah, I love witnessing that.
Yeah, it's like it almost refined it in, like, a fresher approach, and, like, suddenly I could see how everything linked together, whereas before it's kind of like, how am I going to apply that with that? Whereas now it kind of, I can see the pattern and how it flows together and how it will mirror.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Thank you for that. Guys, definitely do check out the book. You can find this on your website at RebeccaCampbell.com. Is that right?
.com was taken. It's a common name.
Oh, bless. So yeah, guys, you can find it at RebeccaCampbell.me. We are coming towards the end of the show. It's gone so quick. My dear, I wanted to ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
And my first one is, what's your 5 top tips for someone who's struggling to turn on their light and kind of follow their calling?
Okay, so the first one would be to dedicate to showing up every day to do something that turns your light on. So like, one thing could be meditation, it could be chanting, could be dancing, but show up with discipline. And it can just be for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't have to be 3 hours, but just 5 or 10 minutes a day. Do some form of practice which you're like doing it to turn your light on. The second one would be spend time in nature. Nature is the best healer I know, and also it's like through connecting with nature, it's almost like we kind of like inevitably like come back into its natural rhythmic flow. The third one would be to do a tool I call Follow What Lights You Up. So write a list of 10 things that light you up. This could be anything from like flowers to salsa classes to whatever it is, and just do 10 things and pick one of them to do regularly, right? Because when you follow what lights you up, you know, so I talk about being a light worker, right? The light worker for me is anyone who's dedicated to listening to the call of their spirit, their inner light, versus, you know, the outside world. So allowing your inner light to lead you. And so by following what lights us up, what we're doing is when we're lit up, we light up the world around us without trying. So it's less about like, what can I do? I need to do this thing, and more about actually just tending to your own inner light. The next one would be dancing. And it's not dancing to kind of like look good, but just dancing, allowing your body to dance you really. The reason for this is that when we move our body in ways that we're not used to moving it, what happens is it's almost like our spirit can take over. And then what would my fifth one be? You know, at the moment for me, it's singing. It's the same thing. It's the expression of the soul. So whether it's through chanting or just doing some karaoke. My husband and I went karaoke the other day, and it was just so much fun. Or just like singing in the car, but anything which is going to voice the spirit within you. So yeah, they'd be my 5 top tips.
I love those, and I totally relate with all of them that you said. Because especially with nature, I find that, I don't know if yourself, but when you're walking on the grass, you just feel so grounded. Like if you just take your shoes off and you walk barefooted, you just feel almost like you're back to you.
Exactly, because we are the earth, really. And when particularly if you're like me and you live in a busy city, it's like it's so easy to get lost in the you know, the go frequency, and you know, everyone kind of like God, being on the London Tube for me, it's just like whoa, I do not know whose feelings are whose, and if I'm feeling that or that man across there is feeling it. And so when we connect with nature, it's like we're able to like let that go and connect back to our own true nature through being in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally relate with the tube. Like, yeah, it's we need more love on the tube, I think.
Absolutely. Where are you based?
I'm based in London as well, so totally know.
Whereabouts?
Yeah, based near North Greenwich.
Oh right, lovely. Yeah, so you get it. And that was the thing when I did the Follow What Lights You Up thing. That's where I discovered how important flowers were to me. And I'm like looking around, and at that stage I didn't buy myself flowers at all. I was like just thinking like I had to wait for people to give them to me, which is ridiculous. And now I look around my room and I'm like, I have flowers everywhere. But it was through following that little trail. And this is the thing about intuition, it's like it's like the intuition drops like little golden seeds along the way, and our job is to like not try and analyze it before we move, rather to pick up the seeds and follow the trail. And so for me, buying myself flowers each week then turned into me discovering how much I love particularly roses, and then that led me to spend more time in nature and discover like the rose gardens of London and the royal parks of London, which I'm sure that you love and appreciate. But for me, I hadn't spent much time in them because I was from Australia and I'm used to the ocean versus the beautiful rose gardens. And then through following the rose gardens, I found my favorite rose garden, which is in Regent's Park, the Regent's Park Rose Garden. And then that's ended up being where I wrote all of my first book.
Wow.
And now I hadn't planned on writing a book. I just showed up with discipline to being in nature and being in the roses. And then the writing came. So this is why it's like, don't wait until you need to figure it out. Rather start following the little seeds and pick them up every day. Carve that little bit of time out every day to hear the whispers, and then allow yourself to be moved by them. That's the most important thing, because most of the time we're waiting for our intuition to make sense and for us to see the full on end-to-end plan before we act at all.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting is with our kind of like careers before, because we've hit those goals, we kind of know, okay, this is what we've achieved. But when we're starting something new, it's kind of like we expect it to happen overnight, but we forget.
Totally. And it's scary. It's scary as well, because when you're changing paths, it's just like, oh, we've already had another one.
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, this needs to be better, you know. But yeah, in my experience, if you follow the little trail, like with discipline, this is the thing, with discipline, it's like it won't happen if it's just like one day you do and one day you don't. It's like dedicating yourself to being like, okay, this is how I'm gonna live my life. It's like flipping the switch, or the order from leading from your mind versus leading from your heart. Now, when you lead from your heart, that doesn't mean that I'm talking about the intelligent heart here, not just the emotions, but the intelligent heart, which is the intuition. When we lead from this, it doesn't mean dismissing the mind, not at all. But what it means is you're leading from there, and then you're putting your mind, your logic, your reason, your drive, your willpower, etc., to work on behalf of the heart.
Wow. You've got me thinking. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. That's absolutely true, yeah. I can absolutely relate with you on that. We are running out of time, so my last question is, what are you most grateful for?
Good question. I think what I'm most grateful for is like living in a time where I can do the work I do now, because I really get how in previous eras it wasn't as safe as it is now, and particularly like in the Western world as well, like as a woman and, you know, as someone who is dedicated to living in that way of like following my intuition and sharing my voice and sharing my ideas and my creations in the world. I just feel so deeply grateful that I'm able to do that freely.
I love that. That is beautiful, my dear. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your light with everybody, because it's just powerful, the work that you do.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to be with you and your people.
Oh, thank you. What a great interview with Rebecca. Do check out her book, because it's amazing at helping you to kind of look at where you're heading and also what your soul's purpose is on this world. Unfortunately, that's the end of the show. Don't forget, you can find me on Twitter at IamGurds, that's IamGurds. You can find me on Facebook at Get Inspired with Gurds, where I bring you lots of inspirational, motivational quotes and tips about life. And this week I want to leave you with this quote. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if only one remembers to turn on the lights. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.